Since 2020, Evergrande's debt crisis has been like a bomb, threatening to trigger a financial crisis at any moment. Will this large real estate company with $300 billion worth of debt become China's version of the Lehman Brothers, or even the first domino piece that leads to a collapse of China's economy? Will the Chinese Communist government save Evergrande? What are the reasons behind the Evergrande crisis? Today, we will talk about these topics. This video contains a lot of information, so please watch to the end. Let's first take a look at some recent news. On September 20th, Evergrande was unable to pay its loan interest, causing the global stock market to plunge on that day. As of September 21st, China's Evergrande share price fell over 92%. Evergrande Auto fell over 96%. Evergrande Property fell nearly 80%, and Evergrande Network fell nearly 90%. The Evergrande Group, which owns 4 listed companies, had a peak market capitalization of 1.32 trillion Hong Kong dollars, or $169.5 billion US dollars. Now it only has $16.26 billion US dollars. On September 22nd, it was reported by Asia Markets that the Chinese Communist authorities intended to divide Evergrande into 3 entities for bankruptcy, restructuring, and acquisition by state-owned enterprises, and the plan may be announced in a few days. Although the news was unconfirmed, Evergrande's stock price, which has been falling continuously, suddenly rebounded sharply on the morning of the 22nd. Also on the 22nd, Evergrande Group also announced that it would pay interest of 232 million RMB for its corporate bond 20 Evergrande 04 on the 23rd as scheduled, but this was limited to the domestic bond market in China. On September 23rd, Evergrande had another international bond due for interest payment of 83.5 million US dollars. Another 47.5 million of interest was due on September 29th. Evergrande did not pay the interest due on the 23rd. If Evergrande fails to pay the interest within 30 days after the scheduled payment date, both bonds will be in default. As we enter October, Evergrande faces more pressure to pay interest. 1 Chinese bond of 122 million RMB and 4 international bonds of 311 million USD will be due for interest payment. According to a September 23rd Wall Street Journal report, Xi Jinping's administration has asked local authorities to prepare for bankruptcy of Evergrande. It quoted a person familiar with the matter as saying that local government agencies and state-owned enterprises have been instructed to prepare for the storm. The source said that local governments should prepare for riots and try to minimize the impact of Evergrande's default on homebuyers and the economy. Based on the above information and the media reports, it is most likely that the Chinese Communist government will step in to deal with the crisis of Evergrande. However, this kind of intervention is not aimed to save Evergrande, but to let Evergrande go bankrupt and reorganize under the guidance of the government. The State-Owned Assets Committee and large state-owned enterprises can then jointly take over Evergrande's assets. To divide Evergrande's assets, it can be based on the previous HNA Group's bankruptcy and reorganization, which can be divided by business type or by geographical area. The CCP can do so because Evergrande is different from the Lehman Brothers, which is an investment bank that collapsed due to excessive speculation and too many subprime loans. But Evergrande has had a lot of land in its hands and many projects under construction. Its liabilities are 1.97 trillion RMB, but its assets are 2.3 trillion, so it's not to the extent of insolvency. Evergrande's problem is mainly due to the 3 red lines for real estate enterprises announced by Beijing, which prevented it from continuing to raise funds, so it faces a dead end. Let's analyze the advantage of this move. Firstly, it can ensure that Evergrande's core properties can continue to operate, so as not to create a large number of broken properties, which may cause riots and social unrest among homebuyers. Secondly, it can also reduce the impact of Evergrande's discounted properties on China's housing market, so as not to create a big chaos in the real estate market. As a result, the impact on China's economy may be minimized. However, the CCP also has an ultimate goal in doing so, which is to take Evergrande, a supposedly private enterprise, and turn it into a state-owned enterprise. This is tantamount to seizing the assets of a private enterprise. In addition, Evergrande seems to be a private enterprise, but is in fact an ATM for the powerful families of the Chinese Communist Party. Professor Yuan Hongbing, a famous jurist and commentator on China's current affairs who lives in Australia, revealed in an exclusive interview with a reporter from Vision Times that there are quite a few number of officials behind Evergrande, but its two main powerful families are Zheng Qinghong, a former member of the Politburo Standing Committee, and Wen Jiabao, a former Chinese prime minister. Wen Jiabao is mainly connected to Evergrande through his wife, Zhang Peili, and his son, Wen Yunsong. Zheng Qinghong's family is mainly connected through Zheng Qinghong's brother, Zheng Qinhuai. Both Zheng Qinghong and Wen Jiabao are political enemies of Xi Jinping. As we mentioned in the previous video on the attempted assassination of Xi Jinping, Zheng Qinghong is a core member of the Jiang Zemin faction and had planned several coups and assassinations of Xi Jinping. He had also privately criticized Xi Jinping's so-called economic ideas as being stupid, evil, and harmful to the party and the country. It is obvious that before the 20th National Congress, Zheng Qinghong wanted to create a lot of political and economic problems for Xi Jinping. Wen Jiabao also implicitly criticized Xi Jinping's leftist policies. The message that Xi Jinping was going to stage a second cultural revolution, which was widely circulated recently, originated from Wen Jiabao. Apparently, before the 20th National Congress, Wen Jiabao also wanted to stir up some political trouble. Therefore, Xi Jinping's authorities used the so-called three red lines in the real estate sector to cut off Evergrande's bank loans and sources of financing, triggering Evergrande's debt crisis. On one hand, this can bring Evergrande back into state ownership. On the other, Xi can crack down on political opponents, clearing the way for his re-election at the 20th National Congress next year. How will Evergrande's huge debt be dealt with? Let's take a look at the general debt situation of Evergrande. Out of Evergrande's total debt of 1.97 trillion RMB, the total amount of interest-bearing liabilities is 571.8 billion RMB. According to Evergrande's letter to government departments at the end of last year, Evergrande's debts involve over 128 banks and 121 non-bank institutions. In addition to that, Evergrande has more than 1 trillion RMB of debts from less regulated shadow banks, which include trusts, wealth management products, and commercial papers. In the case of commercial paper, Evergrande issues commercial certificates to suppliers and partners, agreeing to pay when due, which are extremely risky because they are not guaranteed. Many Chinese companies such as eHouse that is engaged in resale, Golden Mantis, which is engaged in renovation, and Three Trees, which sells building materials, have accumulated commercial papers ranging from tens of millions to billions of dollars. Once they cannot be repaid, hundreds of billions of dollars of debt will inevitably hit the whole industry. In addition, Evergrande's wealth management product, Evergrande Wealth, stopped making payments on September 8th, causing a large number of investors to gather at Evergrande's offices around the world to demand repayment and triggering a wave of social unrest. Evergrande Wealth is a company under Evergrande that provides financial management and private investment with a total scale of 40 billion RMB. Most of the investors are Evergrande's employees and their friends and relatives, along with Evergrande's suppliers and owners. Evergrande has a total of about 120 employees, and together with other investors, there are hundreds of thousands of people involved. According to media reports in China, few employees in Evergrande can escape the curse of Evergrande's financial products. Whether it is real estate, property, or tourism, all employees have received the brainwashing training and task distribution of Evergrande's financial products. For example, in March this year, Evergrande launched an employee-only product with an annualized interest rate of 11.5%. The group requires all registered employees to undergo an assessment on the full marketing of financial products. The appraisal is assigned on a per capita basis. For example, in Henan Company's wealth assessment target tasks for April to May, the divisional leader's target is 10.8 million per person. The assistant leader is 6 million per person. Department heads and middle level is 480,000 per person. Department employees, 180,000 per person. If the task is not completed, the penalty is placed on the person in charge of the department and the supervisory leader. On the surface, ordinary employees are not included in the assessment, but Evergrande Financial has many financial products every year, and all of them are assigned tasks, so employees can't avoid them no matter what. In the beginning, they bought it for themselves and their families. In the end, if you can't get the money, you mobilize your relatives, friends, and neighbors to buy, or you take out a loan to meet the target. This kind of financial product with seemingly high yields seemed to be a good deal, but the actual situation is that it's very difficult for employees to get the principal and interest. The reason is that Evergrande's financial products are released one after another, and there's almost no chance to even take out any of the money. For Evergrande's suppliers, Evergrande will also use various methods to make them purchase their wealth management products. For example, using the financial products to substitute portions of a payment. If you don't agree, you may not even get those payments. When Evergrande had a debt crisis, Du Liang, the manager of Evergrande Wealth, who was the first to get the news, paid off his financial management money in advance as early as the end of May. Ding Yumei, the wife of Evergrande founder Xu Jiayin, also cashed out all of her 23 million investment principal and interest in advance. This is also one of the reasons why Evergrande investors are very upset. According to Evergrande Wealth's latest payment plan, there are a total of 3 types: cash installment payment, physical assets payment, and offsetting the final payment for the purchase of a house. Investors can choose one of the 3 options to pay, or a combination of any 2 or 3 options. The choice of cash will take 27 months to get back the principal and interest. Currently, the physical assets payment plan has been suspended due to the intervention of the local government. Why does Evergrande have so much debt, and where has such a huge amount of wealth gone? Evergrande has more than 800 property projects around China. Professional soccer team, Evergrande Ice Spring, Evergrande electric vehicles, and the Evergrande Wealth we talked about earlier, was a total asset size of about $345 billion US, and almost all of them have huge losses except for the Evergrande real estate property. For example, Evergrande's soccer-related business loses about $150 to $300 million US per year. Evergrande Ice Spring, established in 2013, lost $600 million after 3 years and had to be sold at a low price of $270 million US. But in March this year, Evergrande Group bought back 49% of Evergrande Ice Spring. Evergrande Auto, which has never built a single car, was listed in Hong Kong, and its stock price soared to a high of $9.3 US at its prime, and its market value once reached $87 billion US. In March 2019, Evergrande vowed to catch up to Elon Musk and compete with Tesla within 5 years. However, the loss reached $720 million as of June 30th. Its shares plunged 23% on June 24th to less than 32 cents, just 3% of their high. But the losses from these projects alone do not amount to the $300 billion debt. The huge fortune is actually transferred to the hands of the CCP's powerful and wealthy people who are in collusion with Evergrande. By issuing high-interest international bonds, trusts, and other operations, Evergrande helped the CCP's top officials launder the money and transfer their assets overseas. For example, Evergrande issued US dollar bonds in the company's name with annual interest rates of 12 to 24%, some as high as 36%. Xu Jiayin, the chairman of Evergrande Group, acts as the white glove of the CCP power elites. He bought bonds with his personal funds and then arranged Evergrande to repay these high-interest US dollar bonds as a priority, essentially transferring wealth to his own offshore accounts. Since March last year, Evergrande has returned a total of 7 overseas bonds with a total of about $11 billion US in principal and interest with its own funds. On July 20th, according to media reports in China, Evergrande has arranged to remit $352 million to the bond repayment account in advance to repay the interest of 4 US bonds issued by Evergrande and its subsidiaries. It is said that Xu Jiayin managed to move at least $30 billion US into his overseas accounts. Evergrande's financial report shows that Evergrande had paid dividends every year from 2011 to 2020. 10 years of dividends were paid in cash, with a total expenditure of $17.13 billion US. Among them, the listed company shared $10.092 billion, and Xu Jiayin and his family's shareholding ratio was 76.7%, so they obtained a total of $7.74 billion. In mid-July, just as the debt size soared to $285 billion US, China Evergrande announced that it would hold a board meeting on July 27th to discuss a special dividend plan. In the end, however, this plan was aborted, reportedly stopped by the authorities. Xi Jinping's authorities are naturally aware of the actual situation of Evergrande. According to Yuan Hongbin's information from sources within the Communist Party system, The fuse for this Evergrande explosion was ignited by Xi Jinping himself. Then, through nationalization, the money and power of his political enemy, Jiang and Zheng, were collected. As for the huge loss incurred by Evergrande, part of it will be apportioned to the state-owned banks and paid for by all taxpayers, while the other part will naturally be borne by the financial victims. It is because the impact of the financial crisis is mainly on the upper strata of the middle class, and the CCP will not be lenient in exploiting it. Just like the CCP did with the hundreds of millions of P2P refugees, they were let to fend for themselves. If they want to defend their rights in public, there will be a large number of police officers to suppress them anyway. But Xu Jiayin, the founder of Evergrande, will not get a good end according to the CCP's usual way of dealing with the white gloves of the rich and powerful. For example, one of the founders of the now bankrupted HNA Group in 2018, Wang Jian, mysteriously died. On September 20th, HNA announced the progress of its bankruptcy reorganization, with Chairman Chen Feng and his senior management team having their shares wiped out. On September 24th, Chen Feng and CEO Tan Xiangdong were taken away on suspicion of crimes, and what awaits Xu Jiayin may be the same, a lifelong prison sentence.